So we're going to go ahead and move on to our city operations update. Chris?
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor and Council. We have the city operations update tonight is an introduction to the Road to the Future, our pavement assessment and financing plan. Just for the audience's information, each and every year, every other year, the city conducts a resident survey, and we ask about a number of the city services that we conduct. One of the questions that we ask is, what is an improvement that you would like to see the city make? And in the 2+ years that I've been here and the 2 surveys that I've seen, the number one issue that you as residents have identified is, and I'm glad you're all sitting down for this, it's fixing our roads. What a shock, right? And we want to make sure that we're going to be doing everything that we can to fix our roads. So I've asked Dan Vedral, who is our transportation director, to do an assessment, and he's going to be talking a little bit about that assessment and how we assessed all of our roads. This is also going to be a tag team presentation with Casey Tate, as well as, who is our CIP director, as well as Jeff Litchfield, who is our CFO, who's going to talk a little bit about how we're going to finance this, because it is our goal to do all that we can and to reach a goal for us to be able to invest $100 million in our roads in the next 5 years. That is our goal. And with that, I'd like to turn some time over to Dan to walk us through this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hillman. Mayor, City Council, residents, Dan Vedral, Transportation Director, briefly talking about the Road to the Future. We have a quick presentation here, although there's a lot of dots up there, don't be worried about it. Quick background on the pavement assessment, some of the maintenance strategies that are available to us. Those are our tools in our toolbox. Talk briefly about the pavement condition index. We call it PCI. That's the structural strength of the street. And go over some of the projects and go on down through communication tools and some challenges. Back in 2015, we actually inventoried the entire street system of the city of Irving, Texas. That's 550 centerline miles of road, or 1,400 lane miles. To give you an idea of how large that infrastructure system is, that's equivalent to a 2-lane road from Irving to Nashville, Tennessee. That is what your staff is looking at maintaining for the operations. We also develop a street rating, a geographical database. That way we have actually rated every street in the city of Irving. And also using this information to help develop long-term strategies for maintenance. When one repairs a street, these are the tools in our toolbox that we have. These are some of the things that you'll notice staff going out there and doing. They range from crack sealing, which everybody sees. That's the black lines that we're filling in the holes in between the pavement. We do pavement rejuvenation. We also do full-depth repairs of both asphalt and concrete. And also in the summer, we have what's called a summer overlay program. But one of the things to notice is as you go down the list here on how much the pricing goes up. So one of the keys to assessing the pavement and the maintenance here is to hit it early, because that's where it's the most efficient from a financial standpoint, and we get the most bang for the buck. Certainly if you've got to rebuild streets, it's upwards of $1 million a mile. When we did the pavement assessment, the pavement condition index is what we're looking for. We actually rated the whole street system. This was a scientific approach. This was not done by the human eye. This was all done through lasers and computers. Basically finds the different types of distress that are in the system, how bad is it and how much of it is. And then we rate all the streets from an A to an E, just like you were in school. Hopefully no one got a D or an E. And I'll turn it over to Jeff here, because he's going to talk about the financial side of it for a minute, and I'll be right back.
Thank you, Dan. As we approached this project, we knew that it would be I'm Jeff Litchfield, Chief Financial Officer for the city. We knew that streets were very expensive infrastructure, so we started looking at the money we had available. In our normal CIP process, we usually have about $20 million a year in bond projects that we do. That's our standard. That's based on a 2% ad valorem growth, so we retire bonds during the year and we add new bonds. And looking forward for the next 5 fiscal years, starting next year, we already have $36.7 million built into our 5-year capital improvement program. So that was the base that we started with. We also looked at additional debt on additional capacity created using taxes generated on growth above our normal 2% in ad valorem value. As you know, our ad valorem value did go up greater than 2% last year, but in a long-term look, we use an average of 2% projecting forward. And we calculated that if we can average a 3% growth over the next 5 years, that would be enough to support $7.5 million in 10-year debt in each of the next 5 years. Typically, we issue debt in a 20-year time frame. We're looking at issuing debt in a 10-year time frame. The city manager also explored the possibility of using the taxes generated on 1 cent of the tax rate to be able to be used for streets. So if you'll remember, in this year's budget process, we budgeted and set aside $1.1 million, which is the equivalent of 1/2 cent on the tax rate. The plan is next year that will increase to another 1/2 cent, where it'll be a full cent, so we'll be setting aside $2.2 million in next year's budget for street. And once we achieve that, the $2.2 million should be enough to cover a $22.5 million debt issue, again, for a 10-year time period. So that creates a total 5-year investment of $100 million. So that's part of our $100 million in 5 years. I want to go down. Do I use this? Next slide, okay. Very good. Okay, so we have a $100 million plan for the next 5 years. You'll notice for the first line here for fiscal year 16-17, the only column that has money in it is the 1/2 cent and 1 cent column. That's the $1.1 million that I mentioned earlier that was set aside in this year's budget. That is being used by Dan and Casey and their groups to prepare for and plan for the streets. Whenever you sell the bonds, you've got to do a lot of work before you ever sell the bonds to be ready to do the streets. There's a lot of engineering work, things like that needs to be done. So in next year's budget, we'll have our normal $6.1 million in bonds in our normal plan. Those projects have already been decided, or they've already been identified. We will have the $7.5 million of additional debt capacity. We'll have $2.2 million, which is equivalent to the 1 cent, and we'll also be able to issue the $22.5 million in debt next year because the first principal and interest payment is not due until fiscal year 18-19. So in fiscal year 17-18, we will be able to issue and have available $38.3 million, and again, that's a combination of debt and the $2.2 million being put in. And then you can see how the numbers roll out for fiscal years 18-19 to 21-22. And so you can see the first year, we have the $38.3 million, and then we'll have 17.6, 18, 10.5, and 14.5 million. So that's how we're going to accomplish $100 million over a 5-year period. The risk is if we enter into a recession that we may not have growth on the ad valorem side to be able to fund the $7.5 million each year.
So continuing on in the next 2 years, the public works teams, that's CIP, that's transportation, that's also water utilities, because if we're going to work on streets, we need to look what's underneath them, just on top of the roads also. We got to look at all of it. We're looking to work with the financial team here and just basically review all of our projects, the in-house projects, to see design criteria, what's been met. We're currently evaluating projects that are going to need outside designs. We're going to start to prioritize projects. This is really immense. This is really ramping up more than what we've done in previous years. So there's a significant amount of coordination. There's a lot of need out there, a lot of low-hanging fruit. And we certainly want to be strategic on what roads get improved. We want to do the best we can in improving not just the roads, but the infrastructure underneath the roads. And use whatever current funds we have and beginning these maintenance strategies as soon as possible. Our summer overlay program that was approved in the budget, there's segments of these streets you have listed above you here. These are 13 different streets. These are where we mill and overlay. So these streets, if you live on one of these streets, can expect a certain area of them to be done. If you want a more complete list, contact transportation. I can tell you the exact segment. It got a little busy on the slide, so I don't have the exact segment. Upcoming projects for 16 and 17 is design our neighborhood streets, major streets. Casey, this is where you're coming in. Come on over. I'll tag team you, but he's also working with 183. There you go.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah. Casey Tate, Capital Improvement Program Director. What I want to reinforce is that, as you saw on the slide that Jeff showed, that $100 million in streets bond funds begins next fiscal year. So in CIP, we have some money in this year's bond program that's identified for several streets that we will use to start on the planning. That funding will enable us to then start putting together plans for year 2, 3, and 4 as we go through. We'll get consultants on board for the larger projects. As you can see, our goal in-house is to design the year 1 projects with in-house staff, both neighborhood streets and major streets. We do have some of the bond funds in this year's program that's going to rebuild some of the bridges that are associated with the large drainage work that's going on in the hospital district. If you've been down there, we have 2 channels currently under construction. We have a 3rd one that will go under construction later this year, or later in 17, I'm sorry. So those bridges are part of that capital street funding that we're replacing small, undersized bridges with large bridges that allow the 100-year flood to pass under those bridges. We also are looking at neighborhood street reconstruction. We have $2 million set aside to go along with the annual water and wastewater replacement projects that water utilities does. And what we'll be doing in the past, they were paying for the street replacement out of their funds. This money will then be used it's $2 million this year to do the street replacement in conjunction where we have recently found, and you've seen some slides of it recently, of some poor streets that are neighborhood streets that once we've taken the overlay off, they're just basically crumbling underneath them. Some of these streets are 60 and 70 years old. So we have that money set up for this year. We have some little neighborhood street reconstruction money. We're looking at some streets, and that will be part of the process we do over the course of the next 9 months to set in order all the major streets that we'll be doing. But some of the first ones we know need to be worked on are some shorter sections of Glenmore and Shepherd down off of Irving Boulevard. So we're proceeding with the design of those, anticipating those would be funded in the 5 years of the $100 million. We do have a large project for Hard Rock and Pioneer that needs to be reconstructed. If you've been out there, there's all types of residential development going on that corridor, and it is in dire need. It is just an old, unimproved road with open ditches now, and there's literally going to double or triple the amount of people using that road. So we're going to be doing that road that's one of the major projects we have in this year's budget to go forward. And then the last one is South Nursery, south of basically Oakdale. We have a trail grant from TxDOT to extend basically Campion trails up Delaware Creek through Fritz Park and through Center Park. And we'll be doing that project, but we have to rebuild South Nursery Road down to Hunter Farrell, because right now it's an unimproved stretch, just an asphalt road, and we have to actually have a road with a curb and gutter to put the trail aside the road there. So what the message is that what you'll see through the CIP department for the next 12 months is that we will be prepping and doing design work in anticipation so that when the $100 million does come available next year, the first phase of it, we won't be waiting 2 or 3 years to hit the road with designs. We'll have some designs done on the shelf waiting to bid so we can be under construction in year 1 instead of 2, 3, or 4. So that's the message I have, and I'll turn it back over to Dan.
One of the things that the staff would like to do also is utilize all the different communication tools available to us from the communications department, the Spectrum, ICTN, also social medias. We want to do everything we can to get the word out. We're terribly excited about this, and we're really going to be able to make impact throughout the community. So we'd like to also keep the community abreast of all the different work that we're doing. We do have challenges with design and procurement. There's also ramping up. We got to consider how we want to staff everything, how we want to utilize these funds to be most, like anything else, we need to be cost effective. Another major issue that we get to work with is interdepartmental coordination. We certainly don't want to improve a road if we got to tear it up 3 years later for water and sewer. So we really have got to respect the water and sewer infrastructure and the road infrastructure in conjunction with each other just to maximize all that. I can't stress that enough. And there's also, like anything else, there's always unknown systems. If we get a road programmed in year 3 or 4, and let's say a water line breaks in line 2, we got to see how agile we are. So we got to always be careful of agility with whatever system we decide to go forward with. So our next step is finalize our maintenance strategies, identify our priority projects, start utilizing the tools that we already have available to us for communication. We'll be presenting these a lot at the TNR committee meetings, and then we're just going to look at long-range strategies. And if there's any discussion, I'm available, or the crew's available to answer any questions y'all may have. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, I don't see any questions. Chris, did you want to comment?
Yeah, just, I really want to express my sincere thanks, Dan, to you, to Jeff, and to Casey. This is a major, major investment in city infrastructure. And Dan, if I understand correctly, even with this $100 million investment, our grade of a C- is pretty much going to stay, hopefully, just steady even with this investment, it's a
Our
C
goal is
minus.
to maintain that, sir. That's the goal.
And because for the next 5 years, as we're improving these roads, unfortunately, other roads are continuing to deteriorate. Can you talk a little bit about your approach relative to the strategy and how you're going to be looking at roads all across the city, and how our approach will be is to be improving roads in all sections of the city?
I don't know that there's any one part of the city that doesn't need attention, so certainly we want to globally look at the city. With the different maintenance strategies that we have, we're going to utilize every strategy available. For instance, like a MacArthur or a Beltline, we'll do more panel replacements from a maintenance perspective to start out with that. There certainly needs south to north on both of those stretches. We're doing a little bit on Beltline right now, so anyone who's brave enough to drive Beltline northbound in the morning gets to enjoy that. But that's part of actually improving the system, and then we're just going to start working on the residential streets. But one of the things that was really key in this whole pavement management assessment was using the proper maintenance tool, the most cost-effective tool, to extend the life of every street that we can. And we're trying to be efficient because maintenance is significantly cheaper than rebuilding. So we want to make sure that we spread those maintenance dollars evenly throughout the whole entire community. We want to touch everybody.
John?
Would like to just take an opportunity to share with the audience an example of how expensive this endeavor is. And one of the streets you just had up was the Glenmore Street, which is 1 block long between 6th Street and Irving Boulevard. And this is by the Rancho Restaurant. And Casey has given me the idea of what it would take to do this 1 block. This street is what we call the primitive hogback road with bar ditches on each side of it. It's kind of an original street. If you made a modern day street with curbs, gutters, sidewalks, Casey, what was that number you gave me, just for the audience to understand?
Yes, sir, the estimate on.
Do you want to click on Casey?
The estimate on Glenmore Street for the block that we have which included also pavement, drainage, water and sewer, was right at $500,000.
That's $500,000 for 1 block. And thank you for what you're doing, and thank you, Mr. City Manager, for the vision to say we're going to find a way to give $100 million in the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Oscar?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. On the communications side, I would like to see, maybe you already have plans on the city's website, Road to the Future. Maybe you can have a Road to the Future update. So as more, you had one list, the initial list of the roads that's going to initially be taken off. I'd like to see that continually updated for the citizens to go to the city website
Okay.
and see what the roads, and maybe a forecast, the next 6 months, what it may be. So I appreciate that if you
Yes,
put
sir.
that in there.